Hi there, this is Evan Laing, and you're listening to Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists.
Welcome to Chasing the Horizon, brought to you by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Subscribe in iTunes or stream from the website at bmwmoa.org/podcast. My name is Wes Fleming. Thanks for joining us. I don't really see how I can avoid it in this episode. We have to talk about Harley-Davidson. It was a big week for the motor company. They had a conference call with investors and journalists to discuss their fourth quarter earnings and make two big announcements. First, they announced the closing of one of their manufacturing plants, and second, they announced a timeline for their electric motorcycle. 2017 was a tough year for Harley, and from their own admission, it doesn't look like 2018 is going to be much better from a unit sales standpoint. Harley's net income of $8.3 million in Q4 of 2017 sounds like a lot of money, but it's a huge drop from their net income in Q4 of 2016, which was $47.2 million. They said revenue in Q4 of 2017 was up, but that net income was hurt by a $53.1 million income tax charge related to the enactment of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. They also had a $29.4 million pre-tax charge for that big oil cooler line clamp recall that affected over 57,000 bikes last year. That recall followed the big 2016 clutch recall on 27,000 bikes and the recall of 71,000 other bikes for issues in 2013 and 2015. Harley certainly isn't alone in the world of recalls. Even BMW, which is known for high manufacturing standards, had 3 big recalls in recent years that affected tens of thousands of motorcycles, some of them more than once. Harley may be a little more transparent in its accounting of the cost of those recalls, though, given by the nature of the report on the conference call. At any rate, the recall cost them a ton of money, the change in corporate tax laws cost them a ton of money, and to top it all off, Harley's sales in its home country are down consistently over time. 2017 wasn't an exception to that trend in any respect. Sales in Q4 of 2017 were down 6.7% worldwide in 2017. Sorry, I said 2017 twice there. The biggest drops were an 8.5% drop in the US and a 7.7% drop across the entire Asia-Pacific market. That came with a 7.9% drop in the number of motorcycles that Harley actually shipped to its dealers. The hard numbers played out to just under 242,000 motorcycles that Harley shipped in 2017. They anticipate shipping about 60,000 motorcycles, maybe more, in Q1 of 2018, which is a big jump over the 47,000 bikes they shipped in Q4 of 2017. I guess the rise in shipping numbers comes from anticipation of early spring sales as the riding season gets underway in much of the northern half of the planet. So on to Harley's announcements. They announced the closure of their Kansas City manufacturing plant on a timeline that ends in July of 2019. Harley opened that plant in 1998 when the motorcycle industry was booming. They've cut jobs at that facility several times since 2008 when the big recession started, and the closure of the plant will eliminate the final 800 positions there. They said they'll be moving 450 of those jobs to their plant in York, Pennsylvania. One of their spokespeople called the 450 jobs moving to York, quote, full-time, casual, and contractor positions, unquote. I don't know exactly what a casual position is, but given that Harley has laid off several hundred people in York over the past few years, the news that 450 jobs are coming to town is likely good news for their facility there. They also announced that they're closing a wheel manufacturing plant in Australia. I don't know exactly how many jobs that will cost, but they're doing that too. There was a lot of media attention paid to the impending death of the motorcycle industry as a result of Harley's earnings and the plant closure announcement. But Harley followed all that with what to me is the most exciting news from them in probably decades. A few years ago, as part of the Progressive International Motorcycle Show tour that runs around the U.S. during the winter, Harley had their live wire concept electric motorcycle on display. It looked typically Harley at the time, but it had that big electric engine instead of their traditional V-twin. I talked the booth guys into letting me sit on it for a couple minutes, and that was about it. It wasn't, as far as I know, an operational concept model. Although a lot of people have had test rides on them, they did have a functional concept model that did a tour of the U.S. So I know that they have one that does work. At the time, though, it was just a pie-in-the-sky concept bike. Last week, however, Harley announced that they're putting an electric motorcycle into production and said that it will be available within 18 months. That means we could see a fully functional electric motorcycle from the kings of V-twin aggression by the middle of 2019. I don't know if you've ever ridden an electric motorcycle, but I have to tell you, they are both amazing and completely weird at the same time. They go from 0 to 60 in just a few seconds, and the power is freakishly linear. You twist the throttle, and they just go, 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 but they're completely silent. When I test rode a Zero a couple of years ago, the only noise I heard under power was road noise from the tires. So I suppose we can skip the jokes about Harley having to engineer the sound of open pipes into their electric motorcycles, because there isn't much point in marketing an electric motorcycle, even one made by Harley-Davidson, to the traditional customer base. They're going to have to look at a whole new demographic segment to push this bike, and I'm super excited to see what they're going to do in that regard. One of my favorite things in the world is watching how a company reinvents itself, and that's exactly what Harley has proposed to do in the next 10 years. One thing is for sure, no matter who the manufacturer is, the motorcycle industry is going to have to adapt to keep up with the times and survive going forward. You can be sure we're going to keep talking about that right here on Chasing the Horizon. I'm here with Evan Laing for this episode's discussion portion. And I was just telling Evan before we hit the record button that because he's not part of the industry, I'm actually going to kind of break my own protocol and ask him to introduce himself. So I've already said his name 3 times, but Evan, please introduce yourself.
Well, hello, my name is Evan Laing. I'm a 22-year-old audio engineering student, originally from Northern Virginia. I study down in Nashville, Tennessee. And
plug your school. What school are you going to?
I go to Belmont University, great school for anything really music business related, and I ride a 2008 Suzuki V-Strom 650.
Okay, cool. But that's not your first motorcycle,
no,
right?
That's right. It's not the first motorcycle. It's really the one that I started riding when I got really serious about it. The first motorcycle I rode was my dad's 1994. No, not even 1984 Honda Shadow 600, which did a really good job of getting me through the MSF course and getting me comfortable on 2 wheels after passing that and getting my license, and then was a really good example of what I didn't want in a motorcycle.
Well, that's a good point. Is sometimes you have to ride something to find out not just what you want, but what you don't want.
Yeah.
So what was it? How long have you been riding now? Because I remember when you took your MSF class, but I don't remember how long ago it was.
It was about 2.5 years ago. I remember it because Memorial Day weekend is the anniversary every year.
Okay, cool.
So easy enough.
Yeah, that makes it real easy to remember. So how long was it between when you started riding the Shadow and when you decided to get the V-Strom?
I'd say it was about a year and a half. I took the course, and then I finally was like, freedom, yes, here we go. Gung-ho about it, and then realized that the bike wasn't perfect. It's a 30-year-old bike at the time. There was a lot that needed uptake and maintenance, and all motorcycles need that. This one more so than the others. So I saved up and I set out and did a lot more research on different bikes within budget and with some of the features that I wanted.
Yeah. So what was your original budget when you were looking for your first bike that you were going to buy and own on your own? How did you arrive at your budget amount?
It was a mixture of savings and kind of like price point with the features that I wanted. I decided carburation, while great because it's on everything and everything was cheap, or everything that was inexpensive at the time, fuel injection was the way to go. Definitely, I didn't want to have to hassle with it. I wanted the first bike that I owned that was mine that I could just enjoy. So fuel injection was a must, and then it was kind of that what's inexpensive with the fuel injection and what's gonna have a displacement that's really comfortable for me. So 600, 650 felt right. And around the same time, I got diagnosed with a pilonidal cyst on my tailbone.
Okay. So cruiser was out.
Pretty much, yeah. I realized really quickly that, sitting back on my tailbone wasn't as comfortable, and I had to go through the healing process of that. So there was a lot. That the Shadow was, like I said, it was a great bike for learning what I didn't really want.
Yeah. Well, and plus it got you comfortable being on the road on a motorcycle, which can be very intimidating.
It's true. Yeah, especially when all the bikes at the MSF course are 250 cc's or less.
Yeah. And what is it they tell you? Congratulations, you're now qualified to ride in first and second gear in a parking lot?
Pretty much.
So besides the fuel injection, which comes along with, computers and all that kind of stuff, what else were you looking for your first bike?
Definitely something that I could take on the highway. It was kind of a multi-purpose, a Swiss Army knife of motorcycles,
Gotcha.
if you will. Something that wouldn't limit me to doing any one thing. If I wanted to try off-roading, it wouldn't be that hard to do. Or if I said, let's go ride down the highway for a couple hours, it wouldn't kill me. So sport bike really never really appealed to me in that sense, and that I knew that seating position wasn't for me. Speed is fun, but also dangerous, and
well, and there's certainly a big difference between a 600cc sport bike and a 600cc adventure bike.
Right, and especially in the way it's tuned.
So how did you track down the V-Strom?
Looking over through a bunch of forums and various, mostly just people's responses on what bikes they liked. I also went through a bunch of YouTube channels and these bikes are awesome and whatnot. The V-Strom itself really stuck out to me as a bike that people liked a lot. It was reliable, it was comfortable, and it, being one of those UJM kind of universal Japanese motorcycles, they also came in nicely in budget.
Yeah, and I think that to a certain extent, the adventure bike segment has kind of taken over for that UJM segment.
I agree.
Just because they're everywhere and they're all kind of similar. They each have their own little thing. The BMWs have this and the KTMs have that, and the Hondas have this and the Suzukis have that. But they're all, you sit up straight and you sit up tall and you can pretty much go anywhere on it.
Yeah, I definitely would agree.
Somebody who's crazy might take a sport bike off-roading, but that's not really the target road surface for,
not even close.
So when you, after you decided on looking for a V-Strom, how did you find your bike?
Craigslist.
Craigslist?
I knew that. So I guess I should preface this. I got my friend Clifford into riding motorcycles as well, and so
it's more fun with a friend.
It is, and he did the opposite. He got his license after he got his bike. So we went. We also found his bike on Craigslist. We got his well ahead of time before mine, but I knew that you could haggle a little bit, and I've looked at other things on Craigslist, so I was confident in my ability to come to a deal, some negotiation there.
Cool.
And that, along with being able to really get the history from the previous owner, hopefully if they were a good owner, was encouraging. So I felt confident in being able to get a bike from Craigslist where some other people might not.
So when you found the V-Strom and you made the deal and you went and picked it up, did you have to put a lot of work into it, or was it ready to ride immediately? It
was pretty much ready to ride immediately. Like I said, I go to school in Nashville, so I found this bike while I was at school. It was actually out in Memphis, which is a 3-hour drive west of Nashville.
That's not too bad.
It's pretty comfortable. I went out there twice. Once initially to see the bike, cash in hand, give it a ride. Given that I'd never actually seen one in person before, it was bigger than I expected. I was hoping to flat-foot it. That got shattered immediately as a dream. But the next thing I learned about riding motorcycles when I got to the stage of buying my own motorcycle is that the preferences that you've had from riding one bike long enough can be flipped on and off.
Sure.
Going from a cruiser to an adventure bike getting used to riding position that is different and not being able to flat foot the bike comfortably, if at all, then you got to make sure your priorities are in line. And for me, that flat footing no longer became a priority.
Okay. So, and I hear a lot of people say that. I have the benefit of being over 6 feet tall, and before I put boots on. So, I'm
5'7" with boots. So.
Yeah. And so being able to get at least 1 foot all the way on the ground for me has never really been a problem. So, I kind of don't exactly understand when people say, I have to be able to flat foot the bike, because I already can. It's not an issue for me. But if you could just talk a little bit about why you felt that was important when you started looking.
It's all I really ever knew. I took my MSF course on a Rebel. I've ridden a Cruiser that had a 26 and a half inch seat height. And I 28-inch inseam, so that was no problem flat footing. And it was just a sense of comfort knowing that, like, when I stopped, there was no distance I had to travel from me to the ground. It was just, there I am at the ground.
Gotcha. So when you started riding the V-Strom, how did you adapt the reality of the tall bike to the shorter inseam?
A lot of anxiety. The first initial response I had to it was, cool, well, now I have to, if I'm going to ride this bike, I just have to do it. And so you kind of adapt your body posture and your seating position really as you stop. So for me, it's cool, we'll leave it in first, hand on the clutch, and drop your left leg over to the ground, and it doesn't have to lean over too far for me. I'm lucky enough where the V-Strom sits at, I think, 31 inches, something like that.
Which is, I think, is pretty typical for the style.
Yeah, I would agree, if not even low for the style.
Have you thought about modifying the suspension at all to kind of drop it down a little bit to regain a little bit of that comfort?
Yeah, I've definitely looked into some of the wishbone style, I guess, lowering links, and it seems to me like the benefit really isn't all there. It's you dropping $150, which for college students,
that's a big chunk of change for you,
right? Plus the time involved in doing it, and the potential that I'd have to lower the kickstand or like shave down the kickstand, or it just seems like the modifications aren't necessarily worth the benefit for me.
Right, and then if you've dropped $150, you've had your side stand modified, maybe cut and welded back together. Now you're out another $50 to a welder or whatever. So you're $200 to $250 in, and now what if you don't like it?
That's always the concern, and it was far easier for me to just shift my mindset than it was to really be concerned with the money and the process involved in that specific modification.
Yeah, well, I think that was a good kind of mental process that you went through to figure that out, because a lot about riding is adapting to your situation. Mm-hmm. It's not just every time you stop, you're stopping in a new situation. The road might be curved a little different. You might be wet or slick or.
I've definitely had that experience as well.
Have you dropped it yet?
I have.
Okay, see, so you got that out of the way.
Never at speed, I will say.
Good.
That was my dad and I have had this conversation. It was like, cool, well, you're going to drop your bike, almost guaranteed.
Yeah.
And so when I found a V-Strom at the top end of my budget with crash bars, I was like, okay, well, this is a sign. I at least gotta go check it out.
Yeah, crash bars are good for a little bit of plastic protection.
Yeah, I mean, fairings can be expensive if that's important. And
well, and here's the last question I'll ask you about dropping your bike. Did you do it in front of people?
No, actually, no. None of the times. I've dropped it a total of 3 times, and none of them have been in front of people. So there's a little bit of pride that was left intact.
Yeah, so you can admit it to me, but you didn't have to. Nobody saw you do it.
Right.
So, did you use any special technique to pick your bike up, or did you just kind of muscle it up?
There was a YouTube video I'd watched in this whole era of preparation for getting a motorcycle and kind of just that mindset of all the gear all the time and getting ready for if something happens. I'd seen a couple of YouTube videos of here's a way to do it without destroying your body.
Right.
So the bike was on the right side, on the throttle side, and then I put the kickstand or side stand down while it was still down and lifted it up with my back. So I sat down on the seat, as it were, and then used the friction.
Then walked it back.
Exactly.
So sounds like you did it exactly the way that they teach you to do it on those YouTube videos.
Yeah, it worked. It's worked out well. I've needed help all of those times as well. It's the other concern. It's a heavy bike, and I'm a smaller person with not a lot of torque to bring it up.
Yeah. So you just mentioning, the at-gap mindset. Did you build gear into your initial purchase budget, or did you set like a separate gear budget for after you got the bike?
So I actually did it in a way that I highly recommend to other people. I got all the gear first. That was one of the requirements Dad and I had talked about. He agreed that if you're going to ride this bike, you need to have gear. And there was no question about that from day one. So before we said, okay, we'll put you on the insurance and have you, get comfortable and used to the bike, get some gear. And so I got all of my gear secondhand in really good condition still, with the exception of helmet. That is one thing I cannot recommend secondhand, just for quality control.
Yeah, you don't know if it's been dropped or if the person wrecked with it or anything like that, unless it's scratched up.
Right, and even then it could be old. It's not enough of a value to want to get a secondhand helmet.
Gotcha. So where did you go to look for secondhand gear?
Shop Goodwill of all places. The website, it's Goodwill's online auction house. They have an entire section of just motorcycle gear.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I've gotten some pretty good deals on there. The gear I have right now, I got a pair of touring pants and jacket from Joe Rocket is the brand.
Okay.
For $50.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, armored, and they're textile, so I'll take it.
Sure. So, I know a lot of the people that I ride with and that I know, they have summer gear and winter gear, but you being a college student, you're not going to have the kind of, and especially looking for deals online and secondhand. Did you think of doing that, or did you just focus on getting gear that I can use as much as possible throughout the year?
Most of the second one. Okay. I got gear that I could supplement with, like a sweatshirt or something. The first jacket that I got that I also still have is a summer jacket. It's a vented leather jacket, and I got my bike in February from Memphis, where I rode 3 hours. So, needless to say, even with that jacket and a sweatshirt, it was very cool.
Is it? Now, I've never lived in Tennessee. I've been in Tennessee a couple times, but it's always been in the summer. What's Tennessee February weather like?
February in Tennessee is mid-20s and 30s. It does snow down there on occasion.
Okay, so that's solidly cold.
Especially on the highway when you're going 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get the wind chill down there into the teens, that's for sure.
So you got your bike in February of 16 or 17?
15.
15, all right.
Right? No. 16.
16, last year.
Correct.
A whole year ago.
Yes.
So you had your bike for a while before you decided to take your trip.
Right.
Which is the reason that I wanted to have you on the podcast, was to talk about your trip, because I think it's really great that somebody that's, young, under 30 especially, would just decide one day to, okay, I'm going to ride to the other side of the country and see what's there.
And not even the short way either.
Well, what's the point?
There you have it.
So tell me a little bit about how you got the inspiration for your trip.
I've always been a big gearhead, big fan of motoring, car shows, and motorcycles. As I was brought up, my dad has had his motorcycle.
You pretty much had no choice.
Yeah, there was really no option in that, which I'm okay with.
Yeah.
And I had always, like, this cross-country road trip is always like an idea. It's this ideal thing that you want to do, have fun. You're going to take it with friends or what have you. Most people, for them, it's in a car.
Right.
For me, that independence and freedom came at the hand of two wheels, which was fantastic. And I had friends from high school. I had friends I'd known for years, scattered more across the country than I really realized. Some family in there as well. So I had a friend that invited me out to Chicago who I hadn't seen in a couple of years. A friend up in Boston who was graduating in May. So I knew, cool, if I'm going to go see him while he's in school up in Boston, I got to do this soon.
Right.
Relatively soon. And some friends out on the West Coast as well. So the real motivation for this trip was I get to do that cross-country road trip that I've been, kind of dreaming of and idealizing in my head. And I also get to see friends in different states and stay with them and really make an adventure out of it.
Yeah. So did you go to Boston first and then turn left and go to...
Actually, no. Boston was the fourth or fifth stop on the trip.
Okay. So, and you did this after school got out, so you left from Virginia.
Left from... The first leg was from Nashville, actually.
Okay. There you go.
I started in Nashville. I went down to Atlanta. An old roommate of mine had moved down there, or moved back there, I should say. And then I went down to Orlando. And another old roommate of mine, through some mishaps, ended up back down there with his family.
Gotcha.
And then back up to Nashville, trailered the bike from Nashville to Virginia, and went up to Long Island and then Boston after that.
Okay, and then from Boston, where was your next destination?
Next destination was Chicago. I got rained down in Connecticut, and I looked it up the other day, Wilmington, Connecticut. So I decided either 1 hour that I had already ridden through in the rain and go get a hotel, or 5 hours in the rain, went and got a hotel.
Yeah, it took the hour.
Yeah, exactly. Then to ride out for the night, I was sloshing up into my hotel room after I checked in, and the other gentleman at the end of the hall said, "You look pretty wet. You want a beer?" Just handed me this. I've got a picture of it up on my Instagram page. That was like the first moment of the brotherhood being realized.
Yeah, that's a very real thing that I think a lot of people who don't ride, I don't want to say they don't understand it, but they just don't know it exists. You know, you see Jeep drivers, they wave at each other, and I wonder if they have that same culture. But you can spot a drowned out motorcycle rider in a hotel.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty easily. So, from eventually you got to Chicago,
yep.
And we can go back and fill in some of the gaps if you want to. But from Chicago, then where did you go?
I found my way to Denver, Colorado.
Okay.
Had some family out there, and I also made a trip down to Colorado Springs. I tried my best to spend 2 or 3 days in most of the cities, the big destination cities. And my day trip down to Colorado Springs took me through a place called Garden of the Gods.
Yeah.
Which is a absolutely gorgeous, I think it's a national park. With some just absolutely gorgeous rock formations and a nice little paved road that goes through the park. Got a good opportunity for enough photos there to fill a photo book, as it turned out.
Cool.
It's my Christmas present to my grandparents.
Nice. Is that who lives in Colorado, your grandparents?
No, actually, they live up in Maryland. My cousin, who went to school out in Colorado, or out in Denver,
Gotcha.
Lives out there, has lived out there for the last 8 or 9 years.
So after Colorado, next was
Seattle, actually.
Okay. And that was your end point, your turnaround point.
Actually, my turnaround point was Los Angeles.
Okay. So after Seattle, you went down to L.A.
Yep, by way of getting stuck over Memorial Day weekend in Portland, Oregon.
Nice.
There are worse places.
Yeah, Portland's a pretty cool city.
It is, and I got very lucky in Portland. I'll just say that. And then I made my way down to Los Angeles, hung out with some friends of mine from Belmont there for 2 or 3 days. And then I got to meet the son of the owner of Thunder Road Motorcycles out there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and then I got to meet the owner. Very, very nice family. The Hassans out there.
Awesome.
Left Los Angeles at 9 in the morning, Pacific time. And 51 hours later, all across I-40, I've made it back to Nashville.
So you just bombed it home?
I just bombed it home. Stopped in a few cities for power naps. I fell asleep in a Starbucks in somewhere in Little Rock, Arkansas, at 5:30 in the morning with a cup of coffee in my hands. Woke up 2 hours later, cup of coffee still upright, and went, "Oh wow, I should finish this."
There's a neat trick right there, and then you had a cold cup of coffee.
Yeah, well, lukewarm.
So was that the plan the whole time, or once you made the left turn at L.A., did you just not have anywhere else that you wanted to go? or were you on a timetable? I guess what I'm trying to find out is, were you on a timetable that you had to do that?
I think more than anything, there was a timetable. It was less defined and more self-imposed, since I knew I didn't want this to take the 3 months out of my summer between semesters, and I had wanted to come back and do some more work with the job I had up back here in Virginia. I said, okay, we can stop, or we can just go until your body says stop, and that's what happened.
It's like an endurance test.
It was.
Clearly you made it.
I did, yep. I have...
as long as you're not falling asleep on the bike.
Right. That is the caveat there, and that's really everything that should be avoided at all costs.
Yeah.
And I have the paperwork that I still need to turn in for my Iron Butt ride.
You should do that.
As a trophy of sorts.
Yeah, there you go.
Trip.
So you got back to Nashville. You came back to. Were you working in Nashville that summer, or were you working back here at home? I forget.
Working back here at home.
Okay, so
Nashville is just a nice marker of places to stay.
And then you came home and you worked for the summer, like millions of other college students. But when did you feel different having done this trip?
Absolutely. It feels like a cliche to go, oh, I did this trip and everything's changed, or my life is for the better, but it feels like a sense of accomplishment and a sense of pride and freedom, and just a nice waypoint for life, if you will, as I know as I grow older, as I move forward and hopefully do this again in different stages, and hopefully with somebody else at my side, that I can say I've done this. I was 21. I rode 10,000 miles around the country, and
by yourself,
by myself, on a bike that had 27,000 miles when I bought it, and really, I had seen it through. I'd planned for it and accomplished it, and have the pictures to prove that it happened.
There you go. So, I want to ask you a couple of questions about the trip itself. I mean, we kind of blew through the itinerary,
right?
But I did that on purpose.
It's 42 days. Lots to talk about.
Yeah, and I remember following it a little bit here and there and checking in with your folks. I've known you for a long time. Do you remember how old you were when you met me? 5
or 6, I thought.
Yeah, I think it might be.
Yeah.
4 sticks out in my head, but I was on drugs. I don't mean I was on drugs.
Yeah.
I can clarify. I was in the hospital the first time I met you, and that's why I was on legal prescribed drugs. But I know it was a long time ago, and I kind of watched you grow up. And
it's weird to hear it from that perspective.
Yeah,
I've experienced the other side of that.
It was. I was really impressed. Not that you accomplished the trip, because I knew you would, but that you even wanted to do it in the first place. Because there's just knowing that there's young people in this country that are out there excited about owning a motorcycle and excited about touring on a motorcycle, really gives me hope for the motorcycling industry in the future,
Yeah.
Because,
I've heard that we're responsible for killing off the motorcycle industry amongst many other industries as a millennial.
Well, we blame the millennials for a lot of stuff. But what makes me think, to go back before I ask you kind of about the specifics of some of the spots on your trip, how important do you feel that, social media and digital resources were in getting you into finding your bike and getting into your trip and kind of making those connections? Was it, I guess what I'm trying to find out or get you to talk about is, could you have done the trip without social media? Would you have had as much fun?
I definitely think I would have had as much fun, maybe even more fun, not having I felt this almost day in and day out as I developed the social media following and content that I was producing while on this trip, and that I had these plans that I was doing and I was sharing them with people, and a lot of people thought that was cool, but it felt like a burden of something that I had to do on top of just attending the trip.
Right.
Which, from the social media perspective, that it helped in making connections and actually making the plans and helping with the logistics of the trip. but while I was on the trip actually doing it, it felt more like a burden than it did a benefit. But it's a double-edged sword too, because it allowed me to take pictures and have a gallery of these things that I was doing along the way. So it definitely offers an added. It's a tool. It's a tool like anything else that you can use, and it definitely helped with the trip planning and certain elements of the trip as they happened, but not. It certainly wasn't required, and I certainly don't think it's something that you should have to like do as you do a trip like this.
Right. So, walk me through what was one of your typical travel days. You know, like what time did you get up? How many miles did you expect to do? What was your loadout? You know, kind of thing. What were your goals on an individual travel day?
So generally, I'm a night owl, so I would stay up probably too late the night before, which meant I'd slept in until 9 or 10, which I know might be blasphemous to some of anybody who's...
Ride your own ride. You know, if your biological clock kicks you out of bed at 10 o'clock in the morning, then that's when your day starts.
Right. So I would leave, I would get up, have something to eat. I also discovered the merits of coffee to a very good extent on this trip. And so I would get that into my system, and, you know, probably 45 minutes to an hour after I'd gotten up, I'd be packed up with whatever clothes. I traveled with 2 bags on the trip. Okay. Which... Yeah, no, just literally just bags. One was on my back.
Like duffel bags?
Yeah.
A duffel bag and a backpack?
Backpack and an old camping pack that I had from my Boy Scout days.
Okay, was it waterproof?
No.
So how did you protect your gear if it rained? And it sounded like you got rained on a couple times.
Mostly a tarp.
Okay.
That was acquired on the trip and throughout the route. But the time I got rained out in Connecticut, that was really the first exposure I had to a lot of rain, and that was the calling card really that meant, cool, I need to get a tarp. I can't just like dry out my stuff in a hotel room tonight.
Right.
Every night, every time this happens.
Yeah, you can only hang so much from the shower curtain rod.
Right. Yeah, and most of that is the gear that I just like ripped off my body from being soaking wet.
So it sounds like you started your riding day around 10 or 11 most of the time. Mm-hmm. So how would you proceed from there? How many, like, did you have a goal? I got to get 500 miles today?
Usually, yeah. I would say my goal was anywhere from 300 to 400 miles a day, depending upon, you know, my travel days being... Cool, am I halfway to my destination? Am I a quarter of the way to my destination? Or what is the next stop that I'm making, basically? So I would get on the road, get going, find myself a gas station, and then chug out 100 miles until I needed to use the restroom or take a water break. Or if I was lucky, 200 miles and just to the next gas station. So the days were... long, ultimately.
Yeah.
Because I knew that at the end of the day there was a timeline to this, and I knew that there were certain things that I felt I had to do. So if I didn't push forward through the day, they wouldn't get done. Right. And those miles weren't going to run themselves.
No, miles are always out there waiting for you to cross them.
Exactly.
So then... if you were in between destinations, where would you stay? Did you do any camping, or did you...
I didn't do any camping. When I had originally planned this trip out in my head, I thought I'd do a lot more camping. I brought a camping sleeping bag, and I brought these things that made it look like I was going to be camping. But I didn't bring a tent, didn't bring anything. I don't think I even brought a hammock with me. Okay. So by the time that this plan fully came to fruition, I was planning on staying either in Airbnbs or hotels or guest bedrooms or guest spare couches.
Right, and sure, when you got to where your friends or family lived, you knew you could stay with them.
Right. There were a couple nights where, like the hotel in Connecticut, that wasn't planned. That was just, there's a hotel here.
I'm
cold and wet. Yeah. I don't care how much it costs. I'd like a room, please.
So how did... mentioning that makes me think, you budgeted for your gear, you budgeted for your bike. Did you budget for the trip?
Yes, and not enough, but yes. There was... I had taken some time off of school before the semester prior that I left, and so I spent a lot of that time working.
Okay.
And so the savings is what generally funded the trip, as most trips go. And then there were more hotels than I expected, I think, along the way, and some more expenditures that came up, like, oh, it's Memorial Day weekend and you're stuck in a hotel for 3 days at $110 a night. Well, that's the same amount of money you originally had budgeted for food for like 30 days.
Yeah.
So we'll adjust this a little bit. And then
sounds like you might be eating Pop-Tarts for a while.
Right, or that beef jerky looks really good today.
That's right.
So there was some budgeting that went on for this trip, and that's one of the things that I learned, I think, more harshly than some of the other lessons, is that the planning for the budget is important, much like other plans that'll go out the window as you try to use it, especially on an adventure trip like this, where it's supposed to have a little more freeform, that kind of loose planning to it.
Yeah. Well, and the kind of the standard wisdom for those kinds of things is take half as much gear and twice as much money, and then you're probably going to be fine.
I like that. I'm going to have to retain that for future use.
Yeah. So, did you have any trouble with your bike while you were on the trip?
Yes. When I say I was stuck in Portland for 3 days, it's exactly what I'm referring to. The bike had just crossed the 32,000 mile threshold.
Okay. Which,
as I later discovered, was about the point at which that end of the first generation V-Strom stators like to go out.
Okay. So you fell into that kind of typical wear pattern of that first generation stator.
Right. And I learned that the hard way, effectively. I got stuck on the side of the road, side of the highway, when after a mile, all of my gauge cluster went to zero.
Sure.
Bike was still running, and so I said, okay, I guess we're gonna still go.
See how far we go.
And a mile later, I found myself on the side of the road, like, crap, what do I do now?
Yeah, and that's the downside of having a bike with fuel injection and computers, is that when the stator goes, you only have the battery, and once the battery's done, you're done.
Yep. Which turned out to be a good mechanics lesson for my own right, but an expensive one at that.
Yeah. Which, again, matched your budget.
Right.
So how did you get that taken care of?
It was a combination of the resources I had at hand and just will to get it done. I swear. I found someone to tow my bike into the nearest city, which was Portland, Oregon, across the state line from Washington. And in the car, I called any shop that had their number registered on Google Maps. Like, I looked up motorcycle shop, repair shop, like any single phrase or tag words that you could look up. I did, and I finally found a shop, because this was Thursday before Memorial Day weekend. Everyone's either closing up or getting ready to close up, and nobody's taking parts orders, nonetheless.
Yeah, and a lot of motorcycle shops are closed on Mondays.
Exactly.
Anyways.
So I'm struggling to find someone that will even help me out.
Yeah.
I finally called a guy. His name was Mark. He owns a shop up near Airport Road in Portland. He said, "Yep, I'm about to close up shop here. Do you think you're going to be here before 5 o'clock?" And I said, "Nope. Can I bring it by tomorrow?" And he said, "Yes." Okay, sounds good. So now I've got a shop that'll let me bring the bike in.
So they'll at least look at it.
Right. No, it'll help me figure out what's going wrong, because at this point, all I know is my bike died on the highway. And
now it was the stator, but on the side of the road in the car with the bike on the trailer.
Who knows?
Dead bike.
Could have been, yeah, exactly. So then I looked up a hotel, and I went, cool, that's a quarter mile away.
I can walk that.
I can walk that far. And so dropped me off there, got the bike in the parking lot, and did just that. Unloaded all the gear into my room, and
pushed the bike a quarter mile.
Luckily that night I just got to stay in the hotel room. I went across the street and grabbed a 6-pack of beer because what else could I do?
Right.
Ordered some food and went in for the night. Next morning the shop opened at 9. I was there at 9:05. Walked the bike there, and actually I got the bike. There was one downhill section, and I bump started it for the 1/8 of a mile that I had to go. And so I got it there, and he's like, "Yeah, well, your battery's dead. Let's make sure it's not a bad battery." And I was like, "Well, I bought this 6 months ago, so I hope it's not a bad battery." Retrospectively, there were several times where I should have gone, let's look at the stator. I had replaced the battery before, thinking that the previous owner's battery had been in there for a number of years.
Yeah, it was just old or something.
Didn't bother to ask him about it. I now know it was probably because I didn't have the bike on a tender and I wasn't riding it enough and it wasn't getting charged enough.
Right.
So I had a new battery, and then we had this problem all over again. So hindsight's 20/20.
Sure.
But I get a call 3 hours later that day, around noon, says, "Hey, yep, battery's fine, got a tender on it, it's all charged up and holding, so it's got to be something with your charging system. You're going to need a new stator and rectifier." And I went,
What's that?
Pretty much, yeah. At this point, I had replaced the spark plugs, and I had done an oil change on the bike, and put in a new air intake filter.
Okay.
And that was it. So at least I knew how to take the bike apart.
Right.
So at that point, I went, "Cool, can you get those for me?" And he went, "Not in the next 2 weeks."
2 weeks?
Yeah. All the parts shops are closed. They're not going to be taking orders today, and they're all closed on Tuesday. So as soon as we can get an order in is Wednesday, and then it's going to take days to ship. And
wow.
You're going to be here for 2 weeks. I went, "No,
I can't be here for 2 weeks."
I'm most of the way done with this grand motorcycle trip that I've been planning for a while.
Yeah,
that's not okay.
So clearly, you weren't stuck in Portland for 2 weeks.
No, I got on Craigslist. I had some awestruck luck that somebody's watching out for me at the end of the day. And I've heard my dad, briefly talk about signs and angels and guardian angels looking over you as you ride and on these types of adventures. And lo and behold, 2005 to 2008 Suzuki V-Strom 650 stator and rectifier, new in box.
No kidding.
On Craigslist, posted less than 24 hours before.
Wow.
I called up the guy who said, "I'm in Alaska. Sorry, I can't help you."
Oh.
And then he said, "But if I'm your only hope, call me back tomorrow." And so I called him back, the next day when I had, the only option was this, the box of parts, or a couple parts. And he said, "Okay, well, my wife's leaving today to join me up in Alaska for the weekend. I'll see if she can drop them off." And within 2 hours, I called the shop back up, grabbed the bike from the shop, walked it. Well, he had just charged it, so I got to start it up and ride it back to the hotel, and went to the ATM at the bar I got the 6-pack from, got the cash I needed to pay for the parts that the seller's wife had met me at the hotel with.
And then you put the stator and rectifier in.
Here's where it gets more complicated. I put the rectifier in because the tools I had also bought from Walmart. I got an Uber, I got a lift out to Walmart and back just after watching 3 or 4 YouTube videos. Okay, I said, "I need these tools. They don't have to last me, they just have to work."
Right.
So I bought the cheapest tools possible just to get the job done. And I got the rectifier in place in the hotel parking lot. So 5 hours later, tank is off, everything's off the bike, cut out the old rectifier. I had to go back to Walmart because I had stripped one of the mounting screws for the rectifier.
Of course.
Because nothing can ever be easy. And then the rectifier got held on by one of the original bolts. Everything got put back together, and 5 hours later, I was back on the road. Hadn't done the stator at that point because the socket wrench I had was the right size, but it wasn't long enough to meet the engine cover.
Gotcha.
Where the stator sits inside. So I said, well, I talked to Mark, the owner. He was like, well, if your stator is bad, you're not going to get more than 20 minutes out of it. And I said, okay, well, if I get 20 minutes down the road, I stop for gas, and something doesn't feel right, then I know something's up, and I should probably go find an auto parts store to get what I need to fix the stator. And lo and behold, that's what happened. I found myself 20 minutes south of Portland in a Napa Auto Parts parking lot with a quarter-inch socket wrench extender, just going to town, and an hour and a half later, I had a new stator in my bike, and pictures of the grease on my hands, and I think a couple cuts to prove it.
Yeah. So, but you had a problem. You figured it out. You got some help.
Yeah.
You had some luck. You fixed it in the parking lot. You fixed it again in another parking lot.
Right.
And bingo.
Yeah.
So now let me ask you this. Do you have a spare stator and rectifier?
I do not at the moment. That's another thing I need to pick up.
Well, you're probably good for 30,000 miles.
Right. And I have that other two things I picked up at the Napa Auto Parts were a voltmeter, voltometer,
good choice,
and a battery tender.
There you go.
Even better choice. So
yeah, I was going to ask you. I coincidentally happen to have one in the car, and I was going to say, if you don't have one, I'll just give you that one.
No, I learned the lesson the hard way the first time, and sometimes it's all it takes.
So, I don't want to keep you too much longer, but what other lessons did you learn? Not necessarily about riding or about motorcycles, but about maybe even about yourself. What did you take away from the trip?
There is a fundamental version of yourself that can do just about anything with the right resources and enough confidence, and obviously, a little bit of finances here and there. I think you can do whatever you set yourself out to do. And when I met by my old roommates and friends back in Nashville at the end of this trip, I showed them the gear, and I showed them what I had done. And not only were they impressed, but they were really, really happy for me that this is something that I had spent so long working to plan for, and got finally seen through. And there was my friend Billy. He said something that really, really felt as if it summed up the trip in a really unique way. And he said, "So these last 42 days have really just been an experiment in luck." Which, he's not wrong. First motorcycle trip, less than 2 years on the road on a bike, the bike that I had gotten secondhand, albeit from a motorcycle mechanic. He knew what he was doing and he kept up with it. But there was a lot of trust that I placed in a lot of external things, other people, and things that I didn't have to do before. And while I do admit that there should have been more planning and more if this, do this kind of deal, but to see that through and to actually achieve that, especially at someone my age, it bolsters a lot of excitement and confidence in moving forward with the other things I have to do in my life. Now I have to graduate.
Yeah, when is that? When do you graduate?
Shooting for May 2019.
Okay. So you're almost done. You can see the end of that tunnel.
Yeah, I'm on the back half.
And so you're going to take the summer after that off to do another trip?
We will see.
It gives you plenty of time to save up for it.
Exactly.
Thanks for joining me on the podcast. I really appreciate it. Do you want to tell everybody your Instagram or social media or something? So
I have both a Twitter and an Instagram page. If you would like to check me out, it's AV Tech Rider. And I've got
on
some
both
pictures.
Instagram and Twitter?
Yep, Instagram and Twitter. I've got pictures. I've got some random thoughts that were going through my head on the road that I put out on Twitter after I was off the bike. Cool. But yeah, there are some pictures there, and feel free to reach out to me and, whatever you guys do on social media.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate you taking time to join me for the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was fun.
Because this podcast is produced by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, in every episode I highlight one benefit of being a member. I admit it's an enticement to get you to our website and to get you to join for at least 1 year. I've been a member since 1999 and have used the member benefits to my advantage countless times since then, especially the Roadside Assistance Program. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about today. Today it's all about Cardo Systems, one of the big names in motorcycle communications devices. those little units you see stuck on the left sides of people's helmets as they go down the road. With the increasing ubiquity of Bluetooth, it's easier than ever to pipe your GPS or smartphone directly into your helmet so you can get turn-by-turn directions or listen to music while you ride. Cardo Systems produces the award-winning Scala Rider line of communications devices, and they assert that their Pack Talk system is the most advanced and versatile motorcycle communication system available. I use their FreeCom 4 system, and I have to say it works really well, and I've had no problems with it at all. BMW MOA members can save 25% on the Scala Rider Pack Talk and other Cardo Systems products. Go to our website at bmwmoa.org/member discounts to learn more and get the discount code. You have to be an MOA member to log in and see the discount code, but I can tell you this. A Pack Talk Duo system that comes with 2 complete Pack Talk setups that are paired together at the factory costs $580 direct from Cardo. The 25% discount knocks that down to $435, taking $145 off the cost. An MOA membership costs $49, so just being an MOA member saves you over $100 if you buy a Pack Talk Duo setup. The FreeCom 4 Duo setup that I have costs $390. Applying the 25% discount to that knocks almost $100 off the cost, still saving you a good bit of money beyond the cost of even a 1-year membership in the MOA. I want to thank you for coming back for the 14th episode of Chasing the Horizon, which featured a discussion with Evan Laing, a college student who decided to buy a motorcycle and ride across the states. Our next episode will be out on February 19th. Andrew Finberg composed and recorded our theme music. Karen Halker designed our logo. Thanks again to all our guests and listeners for giving us their time. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road, or off it. Ride safe.